I used to think I had the upper hand. People said there were more men than women, so I believed I could wait for the perfect match who met all my expectations. But reality hit me hard. In big cities, for every man willing to marry, there are at least 8 women hoping for the same. In smaller cities, it's 3 to 1. Many men aren't even interested in marriage anymore. Some feel they can't meet the demands, and others have their own standards now. Looking back, I realize I turned marriage into a transaction, demanding a car, a house, and a dowry, thinking it was normal. But what kind of partnership is that? True relationships should be about balance and mutual growth, not just demands. It took me time to see this, but I can't ignore it anymore. Building something real means letting go of illusions and creating equal partnerships. I went to a blind date, and as soon as I sat down, the guy started asking me questions that made me feel completely uncomfortable. He asked how much I earned per month, and when I told him it was over 6,000, he said my family must be well off. When I mentioned that we were an average family and my parents worked, he kept asking, "Have you bought a house?" I told him I lived in a rented place, and that's when he stood up and said he needed to leave because he had something to do. At that moment I got really upset and asked, "What's going on? You just get here and start asking about my family and my income? Are you here for a date or to find a rich woman?" He replied, "Don't misunderstand me, I just don't think we're compatible." I, confused, asked how he could come to that conclusion so quickly since we barely knew each other. That's when he explained. He said that as soon as he walked in, he noticed the watch I was wearing, which he thought cost between 30 and 40,000, but my salary was only a little over 6,000. He did the math, factoring in my rent, food, bills, transportation, and even the clothes and cosmetics I used, saying that I probably saved at most 1,000 a month. He then said that if I could still afford such an expensive watch, it must be for one of 3 reasons. Either someone rich gave it to me, I bought it on a credit card, or, worst of all, it was a fake watch, which would be even more vain. I was extremely upset by what he said, but then, with a clearer head, I started to reflect. I really don't understand how men have gotten to this point, where they don't even try to get to know a woman in a deeper way. I used to think the stories other women told were exaggerated, but after going through this experience, I realized that truly good men have disappeared. There are no more good men, and the few who are still willing to go on dates like this are the ones who haven't been able to find a relationship any other way. Now I'm left with being alone or maybe finding someone naturally, but I can no longer trust dates like this. It's sad to think that relationships have become so transactional, based only on appearances and financial status. It feels like no one is willing to invest in building something real anymore, and the pressure to conform to these shallow standards is overwhelming. I feel like I'm constantly being judged, not for who I am or what I can offer emotionally, but based on how much I earn, what I wear, or even what watch I have on my wrist. I didn't expect this when I agreed to go on a blind date. I thought it was a chance to meet someone new, maybe someone with shared interests and values. Instead, it turned into a cold, calculating exchange. I guess I shouldn't be surprised though, this seems to be the norm now. Everyone's so focused on the material, the external, that no one takes the time to truly connect. I used to think I had to settle for someone just because I didn't want to be alone, but now I understand that it's better to be alone than to be with someone who only cares about superficial things. So I guess my options are simple. I either stay single or take a chance on meeting someone organically, without all the expectations and pressures that come with these types of dates. But after this experience, it's hard not to feel disheartened about love in general.
Today, I came across a video that really got me thinking. The video discussed how men are becoming more aware and no longer want to spend on female consumption. The economy of men doing everything for a woman is slowly disappearing, and this is creating a divide between men and women. On the other hand, women are becoming more independent. In short, men and women are becoming opposites. I found it interesting because the videos seemed to favor men, saying they would rather spend 5,000 on gaming equipment than pay for a dinner for a woman. But I believe that if you really like someone, you can't avoid putting effort into it. And that goes for both sides. Women also buy gifts for men, just as men buy gifts for women. The value of the gift may differ, but that shouldn't be considered submissive behavior. What I see is that capitalism is creating this division between the sexes, trying to follow the model of countries like Japan and South Korea. Our country has a large population, and the aging trend is growing, along with a declining birth rate. Japan took years to get to this point, but we could be there in just a few years. South Korea is also experiencing this, with capitalism promoting a singleness lifestyle for both men and women. This has caused a split between feminism and chauvinism, which doesn't help anyone. Now, these same models are being brought to our country, and I think it's unnecessary. Men and women have always been a combination, a partnership that works well. The idea that men and women don't get along is a flawed mindset. Sure, some tasks may be more suitable for one or the other, but in the end, collaboration between the sexes is what makes life richer. So, I don't understand why people are distancing themselves from healthy relationships. I know that nowadays many people are delaying marriage or choosing not to have children, but I think that with time, reality will hit. I spoke with some friends, and many of them said they prefer to stay single, without girlfriends or boyfriends, and are okay with it. They don't want anyone interfering in their world. But I keep wondering, will this always be the case? I myself did some interviews in nursing homes, and I found that if you don't have children, caregivers might disregard you. This happens because, without descendants to support you, it's like you're alone in your old age. The money you have doesn't mean anything to others, and that can be very sad. The aging population is something happening quickly, and with it, retirement will be difficult to achieve, maybe around 60 or 70 years old. And as the value of money decreases due to inflation, it might be necessary to continue working longer to survive. The only thing that really matters and can guarantee us security in the future is our family, our children. This is the pattern in any country, and I think young people are being influenced by a distorted view, thinking they don't need relationships or children. But if you follow what most people are doing, you'll end up lost, because the truth is with those who choose to live more traditionally. When you get older and realize you have no one to support you, it will be too late. These things are important, and that's why I want people to think more about it. I've seen what happens in nursing homes, and I know the impact of aging and retirement. Unfortunately, the future could be very difficult if we don't prepare for it now.
The awakening of men is shaking the marriage system that has existed for thousands of years. Have you heard the term wild river oyster? In simple terms, this refers to the open promiscuity that people used to practice in ancient times. This was common until the Shan state period, and no one thought there was anything wrong with it. Why? Because at that time, people focused on having as many children as possible. Why? Because the production levels were so low that children were considered labor force. No one cared who the father was, as long as there was work and no one starved. At that time, people had no concept of marriage. But over time, production levels increased, and living conditions improved, leading to the emergence of private property. It was at this point that men, being the main productive force, began to want to ensure that their wealth would be passed on to their own descendants. This meant ensuring the heirs were their biological children. However, since there was no DNA testing, the only solution was to strictly enforce the chastity of women. This gradually led to the formation of the marriage system. In the agricultural era, marriage was merely a formality to confirm that two people were a couple, signaling exclusive sexual rights between them, similar to how animals mark their territory. So, both in China and in the West, polygyny was common at that time. Later, the Industrial Revolution in the West created a demand for many female workers, giving women the ability to earn their own money and sustain themselves. This led to women becoming more independent and fighting for rights. Over time, the monogamous marriage system became predominant. After the founding of New China, in just a few decades, we rapidly developed from a weak agricultural country into the largest industrial empire in the world. More and more women gained the opportunity to receive an education. Monogamous marriage was written into law and became the accepted marital system in society. At this point, things still seemed good, but why is the marriage system now at risk? Here's a painful fact: our middle-class men have been exploited for too long. At the top of the social pyramid are 1% of men, who possess immense wealth and power and can manipulate gender relations at will. In their game, they do whatever they want, regardless of gender. Below them are 10% of men at the bottom of society, marked by ignorance, male chauvinism, domestic violence, and poverty. These men are generally marginalized, and together with women in similar situations, they become invisible in society. Then there are those stuck in the middle class, working tirelessly and selflessly to form the backbone of the prosperous industrial nation. Traditional thinking tells them they must bear family responsibilities, so they grit their teeth, running back and forth between work and family. They work during the day, drive for rideshare at night, wear clothes until they are torn, and hand over all the money they earn. Meanwhile, these men, who grew up under the red flag and the national flag, received an education in gender equality. The expectation is that men and women should respect each other. You respect me, and I respect you. But in reality, society tells them that, after being used, their status in the family is worth less than a dog's. Why do women, who received advanced education, still demand the traditional dowry system? Why, despite their deteriorating domestic skills, unable to even clean the floor and relying on a robot vacuum, do they still see themselves as free babysitters? Why, when their emotions are unstable, do they expect men to provide unconditional emotional value? Who can explain what emotional value really is? As a result, men begin to question and awaken when they realize that the respect they give is considered a given and even transformed into an endless demand. No wonder, in 2023, China's marriage rate was only 5.4%, while the divorce rate continued to rise to 2.6%. More and more men are thinking, why please a girlfriend when I can please myself? Why desperately propose marriage when I can focus on earning money? If marriage can be avoided, let it be avoided. If it's necessary, let it be delayed as much as possible. Data shows that in 2023, the average age for a man's first marriage in China was 29 years. So, who is really sabotaging the marriage system? From a long-term perspective, this might be because we are once again facing a shift in times. With the further development of productivity, improved social security, and an enormous abundance of goods, individuals no longer need to rely on anyone to live comfortably. In this context, marriage, which was once necessary for survival, has now become a burden. Does the existing marriage system still serve a purpose?
跟单身的女生们说个扎心的现实。
Here's a hard reality for single women. There will be no more puppy love economy, especially when love is openly commercialized, and men seem to be unconditionally paying. That era is over. You see, Valentine's Day, Goddess Day, Christmas. Various holidays have been turned into days where men pay for love. To transfer 1314520. This has become the standard package for expressing feelings. However, this type of passionate relationship is difficult to last. Today, men have awakened. They no longer want to be dragged by the irony of responsibility, and they are courageously pursuing equality in relationships between men and women. Society already demands a lot from men, from youth, requiring them to have cars, houses, and savings. Work hard on their careers while maintaining a gentlemanly demeanor. Until middle age, ensuring the family's quality of life. Carrying everyone's expectations. Handing over their salaries. And still working hard without complaining. The data on the labor supply ratio proves this. In Germany, one person can support 6.8 people. In the United States, one person can support 4.8 people. In South Korea, one person can support 3.8 people. And in our country, only 1.1 people. The pressure is evident. In this context, the number of marriages has sharply declined. Data from the Ministry of Civil Affairs shows that, in the first 3 quarters of this year, the number of marriages was only 4.747 million couples, a decrease of 943,000 couples compared to last year, setting a new low in 40 years. Half of the young people aged 25 to 29 who tried to marry are still single, and it is expected that the number of single people by the end of the year may exceed 300 million. Late marriage or no marriage has become the norm. This does not mean that young people are irresponsible, nor that they do not want to get married. On the contrary, they know the difficulty of establishing a family and career, and while their career is not stable, to give their future children a better living environment, they choose not to enter marriage for now. In the past, perhaps because the cost of marriage was low, People were happy to marry. Now, marriage means being diligent, being cautious. Illness, unemployment, and big expenses can become marriage killers. The significant decline in the quality of life makes young people hesitate to get married. The coldness in obstetrics and gynecology, the difficulty in finding infant formula, the lack of preschool places, and the oversupply of classrooms are reflections of changes in the marriage economy. So, when you meet a good person, just get married.
现在真的不得不说，
Now, I really have to say that if men awaken, it will be a tragedy for women. Because right now, men have truly entered a mode of self-destruction, living in loneliness and even resorting to revenge against the situation. Maybe you don't understand what I'm saying, so let me explain. What's happening is that, in the marriage market, many men are trying to use this behavior to react to the distorted view of marriage and relationships held by women today. They're trying to create a more equal view of marriage, but why this feeling of revenge? Let's talk about the rising divorce rates and the declining birth rate. Men are taking this seriously. If it's so hard to pursue, if women are so picky, then fine, I just won't pursue anymore. I'd rather stay single for my whole life, make my own money, and enjoy that. If it's said that having children is only for men, then fine, I won't have children with you. Men no longer want to be manipulated. If I can't handle this, why keep submitting? Honestly, I wouldn't want to see this happen either, and I believe no one wants it. But deep down, many men stay single to preserve their lives. It's not about revenge on marriage, but about an inability to marry because marriage has become financially unsustainable. The cost of marriage is simply too high. There are the costs for the wedding gift, the car, the house, the ceremony. All of that easily adds up to hundreds of thousands of yuan. And ordinary people can't afford it. Even if they manage to scrape together money in various ways, taking loans, and indebting themselves, there's still no guarantee that the woman will stay. I recently saw a video of a guy who took out an online loan to pay a large dowry for his girlfriend, trying to satisfy her vanity. After they got married, the woman found out about the debt, and with the burden of the loan, she simply ran away and divorced him. Isn't this a harsh lesson for men? Many men spend all their savings from a lifetime of work, marry a woman, and end up supporting the whole family as if they were taking care of an ancestor. At any moment, if the woman isn't happy, the divorce will come, and what does it leave? Everything lost, time, money, and no future to rebuild. What's left for the men? Hundreds of thousands of yuan in debt, with a dowry that makes them feel completely desperate. They live on the edge, knowing that at any moment, their lives can fall apart. With such a high divorce rate, would you dare to bet on marriage? And if you don't get married, then the man doesn't have to worry about buying a house anymore? Doesn't have to deal with all that heavy debt? Let me tell you, living alone and paying rent or other expenses doesn't cost that much. If you earn 8,000 yuan a month, you can save 6,000. Now tell me, if you were a man, what would your choice be? What seems more attractive to you?
I dare say that no man can escape the fate of being influenced by feminine values. Before jumping to conclusions, allow me to explain. In the Xia Dynasty, there was Moxi, in the Shang Dynasty, Daji, and in the Zhou Dynasty, Baoxi. All these women were associated with significant tragedies and disasters of their times. King Yu of Zhou, for instance, caused chaos by prioritizing his consort, and the Anshe rebellion was triggered by Yang Guifei. These historical episodes show how men's actions, in many cases, have been shaped by women's preferences and tastes. This has, for centuries, been a way to tarnish the reputations of great men throughout history. In the show 36 Strategies of War, during an episode about the city of Qin, Master Yu Minhong made a controversial statement. Once grown, men strive to attract women, while women have the right to choose men. Especially in modern China, where the gender disparity is significant, women's preferences end up influencing men's decisions and behaviors, even indirectly. When many women demand that a man own a house and a car, most men feel immense pressure to meet these expectations. This concept forms the basis of the saying, "A smile that topples a city." By influencing women's beliefs, one can shape the values of an entire society. Interestingly, this method has also been used in cultural export strategies. After World War II, the United States faced resistance in South Korea. Many Koreans rejected the imposed military state and even developed anti-American sentiments. But how could the US transform the mindset of the population without resorting to violence? The US turned to culture. Several entertainment companies emerged, training male idols with a specific aesthetic: long hair, androgynous looks, fair skin, and slender bodies. With financial and media support, this standard became mainstream. As Korean women began to favor delicate and fragile men, the men adapted, wearing makeup and dressing more stylishly than women themselves. This gradually eroded their natural masculinity, making it easier for the US to exert cultural control over Korean society. Doesn't this theory sound fascinating? It might even make sense, don't you think? Throughout history, men have often adjusted their behavior based on daily women's expectations. But it's essential to recognize a natural rule. Women possess a selective nature, inherited from the times of hunting and gathering. They seek partners who exude confidence, security, and the ability to protect. And this goes beyond finances, considering there was no currency in ancient times. This trait is intrinsic, part of our biology, and unchangeable. Today, we see videos on Chinese platforms where women claim that quality men have all but disappeared from the dating scene. And it's true, these men have either already found valuable partners or have given up entirely, choosing to live their lives naturally without obsessing over relationships. Perhaps they are right. If you agree or find this discussion intriguing, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. See you in the next one.